Commander Hannah Park stood at the viewing window of Earth Station Omega, watching the approaching Loridian ship. The vessel gleamed like a pearl against the blackness of space, its organic curves unlike any human spacecraft. Her heart beat faster. This was history in the making, humanity's first contact with the Loridians. 2 minutes until docking, announced Lieutenant G, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Hannah straightened her uniform. Status report on the welcome committee. All assembled in the main hall, Commander. The diplomatic team is ready. She nodded and took a deep breath. 6 months of preparations had led to this moment. The initial communication with the Loridians had been brief but promising. They seemed peaceful, advanced, and eager to establish relations with Earth. The station trembled slightly as the alien ship connected with the docking port. Hannah led her team down the corridor, rehearsing her greeting one last time. Ambassador Tahoe walked beside her, clutching his tablet tightly. "Remember what we discussed," Tahoe whispered. The briefing mentioned their appearance might be unusual to human eyes. Hannah had read the reports but dismissed them as exaggerations. "I doubt they'll be that different from us," she replied. The airlock doors slid open. Hannah's words died in her throat. 5 Loridians stood in the entrance, and they were unlike anything she had imagined. Their skin shimmered with patterns of blue and gold that shifted like sunlight on water. They had humanoid forms, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but the similarity ended there. Their features were impossibly delicate, with eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. When they moved, it was with a grace that made human movement seem clumsy by comparison. Hannah realized she was staring. So was everyone else. "Welcome to Earth Station Omega," she finally managed, forcing her eyes away from the lid Loridian's iridescent face. "I am Commander Hannah Park." The tallest Loridian stepped forward. "I am Neri, ambassador of the Loridian Collective." His voice was melodic, with perfect human speech despite an unusual resonance. "We bring greetings and hopes for mutual understanding." Hannah noticed General Kim hadn't spoken a word since the aliens arrived. He stood motionless, his mouth slightly open, gaze fixed on the visitors. Several other team members appeared similarly transfixed. Ambassador Teo recovered first. "We have prepared a meeting space, if you would follow us." As they walked through the station, Hannah observed how every human they passed stopped to stare. The Loridian skin changed subtly as they moved, colors flowing in response to their environment, or perhaps their emotions. It was difficult not to watch the display. In the conference room, Hannah struggled to focus on her prepared remarks. The Loridians sat across the table, their presence commanding attention in a way that had nothing to do with their status as visitors. "Earth welcomes the opportunity for cultural and scientific exchange," she said, reading from her notes. Neri nodded, the patterns on his face shifting to warmer tones. "We have observed your civilization for some time. Your resilience interests us." General Kim finally spoke, his voice unsteady. "Your ship's technology, it's unlike anything we've seen." "We would be pleased to discuss technological exchange," Neri replied. "Though we notice your kind seems distracted." A silence fell over the room. Hannah felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "I apologize if our behavior seems rude," she said. "Your appearance is striking to human eyes." Neri exchanged glances with the other Loridians. This reaction is not uncommon among species encountering us for the first time. We had hoped humans might respond differently. One of the other Loridians, a smaller figure with patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat, leaned forward. "I am Mina, biological specialist. May I ask if you find our presence uncomfortable?" "Not uncomfortable," Tahoe said carefully. "More captivating." Mina nodded. "Interesting. Our physical features trigger pleasure responses in your neural pathways. This could complicate our interactions." Hannah felt a chill of worry. The Loridians spoke as if they had seen this reaction before, and it hadn't ended well. The meeting continued, but Hannah noted with growing concern how her team struggled to maintain focus. When she asked questions about Floridian culture, she often had to repeat herself because someone had been staring instead of listening. Even the most disciplined officers found their attention wandering to the shifting colors on Floridian skin or their fluid movements. After 2 hours, they took a break. Hannah pulled Tahoe aside. "This isn't working," she whispered. "Half our team can barely follow the conversation." Tahoe nodded grimly. "I've noticed. Did you see how Dr. Lee couldn't stop watching the one called Mina? He missed 3 direct questions." "We need to adapt quickly," Hannah said. "If we can't communicate effectively, this first contact could fail." When they returned to the meeting, Neri seemed to have reached a similar conclusion. "Perhaps we should conclude today's discussions and allow time for adjustment. This reaction is natural but needs to be managed." As the Floridians prepared to return to their quarters, Neri approached Hannah privately. "Commander, I should inform you that this situation is not unique to humans. Other species have struggled with what you might call our beauty. How did they overcome it?" Hannah asked. Neri's skin darkened slightly. "Some did not. In our culture, those who stare without purpose, those who dream instead of act, are considered undeveloped minds. I hope humans will prove different." After the Floridians departed, Hannah called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. "We have a problem," she announced. "The Floridian effect is stronger than anticipated. We need solutions before tomorrow's negotiations." "Maybe we should communicate by video only," suggested Lieutenant G. "Or assign staff who seem less affected," offered Tahoe. Hannah shook her head. "Neither addresses the core issue. The Floridians clearly value action over passive admiration. If we can't overcome this beauty paralysis, they'll consider us primitive, or worse, unworthy of alliance." As the meeting continued, a message arrived from Earth Command. An unknown vessel had been detected at the edge of the solar system, observing both human and Floridian ships. They weren't alone in the galaxy, and first impressions suddenly mattered more than ever. Director June stood at the head of the conference table, looking grim as he displayed the charts on the main screen. The data showed a clear pattern, one that made Hannah's stomach tighten with worry. 3 trade agreements, June said, pointing to the red markers. "All compromised because our negotiators couldn't maintain focus. Look at the terms we accepted." Hannah scanned the numbers. In each case, Earth had agreed to exchange valuable resources for Floridian technology at rates far below what their analysts had set as acceptable minimums. "How did this happen?" General Kim asked. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Rumor had it he'd been spending extra hours reviewing footage of the Floridian delegates. "We're calling it beauty paralysis," Dr. Minji explained, bringing up her medical reports. "Humans in close proximity to Floridians experience massive dopamine surges. Brain scans show activity patterns similar to those seen in people viewing great art or experiencing romantic infatuation, but stronger." "It's getting worse," Tahoe added. "The diplomatic team's effectiveness decreases with each meeting. 2 of our best negotiators had to be replaced yesterday when they couldn't remember basic talking points." Hannah thought about her own struggles. Even knowing the problem existed, she found herself mesmerized by the shifting patterns on Floridian skin, the fluid grace of their movements. Their voices alone could capture attention in ways that bypassed rational thought. "What about the incidents in the living quarters?" Kim asked. June tapped his screen. "Lieutenant Doyen has been relieved of duty. Security caught him attempting to access the restricted Floridian quarters for the 3rd time. When questioned, he couldn't provide a coherent explanation for his behavior. And he's not the only one," Dr. Minji said. "We've documented 17 cases of what we're terming Floridian fever, an obsessive fascination that's affecting sleep patterns, work performance, even basic decision-making." Hannah remembered her private conversation with Ambassador Neri the previous day. He had approached her after a particularly difficult meeting, his skin patterns dimmed to a soft blue that somehow conveyed concern. "Commander Park," he had said, "I must speak frankly. My people are uncomfortable with how your kind observes us. I've noticed the problem, Hannah had admitted. We're working on solutions. In our culture, those who stare without purpose are considered. He had paused, searching for the right word. Undeveloped, like younglings who have not yet learned to control their basic impulses. I understand. It's not intentional disrespect. Of course, but you should know that in the wider galaxy, species that cannot overcome such reactions are viewed as vulnerable. That conversation haunted her now as she looked at her team around the table. The Security Council wants options, Jun said, bringing Hannah back to the present. Other species are watching how we handle this situation. What about technological solutions? Asked Tahoe. Could we develop filters or screens? Dr. Minji nodded. My team is working with Engineer Hook on specialized lenses that might dampen the neurological effect. But they're weeks away from testing. We don't have weeks, Hannah said. I've received intelligence that the Loridian High Council is debating whether humans are sophisticated enough to warrant a formal alliance. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what was at stake. Humanity had spent decades searching for intelligent life beyond Earth. The Loridians represented not just companionship in the void of space, but access to technology centuries beyond human development. There's something else, Hannah continued. Long-range scanners detected an unidentified vessel near Saturn yesterday. It disappeared before we could get clear readings, but what we did capture suggests it wasn't Loridian. A third species. General Kim leaned forward, suddenly alert. Possibly. Ambassador Neri hinted that other races are observing our interactions. The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity wasn't just making first contact, they were being evaluated on a cosmic stage. I have a proposal, Dr. Minji said, breaking the silence. A neural training program. We start with the diplomatic team and key military personnel. The technique combines mindfulness practice with exposure therapy. Meaning what exactly? Asked June. We gradually increase exposure to Loridians while teaching the brain to process their appearance without triggering the reward cascade. It's similar to how we treat addiction. Are you suggesting we're addicted to looking at aliens? General Kim asked, his tone skeptical. Neurochemically speaking, the patterns are similar. Dr. Minji didn't flinch under his gaze. The difference is that this reaction is involuntary and instantaneous upon first exposure. Hannah considered the options. How quickly could we implement this training? We could start tomorrow with volunteers. I already have protocols drafted. The meeting continued for another hour, weighing risks and alternatives. As they wrapped up, Lieutenant Jai entered with a message for Hannah. Her chest tightened as she read it. We have a situation, she announced. Ambassador Neri has requested an urgent meeting. Alone. 30 minutes later, Hannah sat across from Neri in a small, secure conference room. His skin had darkened to deep indigo, with flashes of crimson, a pattern she hadn't seen before. Commander Park, he began, his voice more somber than usual. I come with difficult news. My government has set a deadline. A deadline for demonstrating human adaptability. The patterns on his face shifted slowly. The Loridian collective has encountered other species with reactions similar to humans. Most could not overcome their fixation. What happened to them? Hannah asked, though she suspected the answer. Some isolated themselves, refusing further contact. Others became effectively subservient, too entranced to negotiate as equals. He paused. Several fell to external threats while distracted. You mean they were conquered? Yes, by species who recognized their vulnerability. Neri leaned forward. Commander, there are predators among the stars. They specifically target civilizations they deem susceptible. A chill ran through Hannah as she thought of the unidentified ship near Saturn. The deadline, she asked. How long do we have? 1 Earth month. Demonstrate meaningful progress, or my government will withdraw their delegation and limit future contact. After Neri left, Hannah remained seated, weighing options. That evening, a priority message arrived from Deep Space Monitoring. The unidentified vessel had reappeared, this time conducting active scans of Earth's defense systems. Analysis confirmed what Neri had implied. The ship's design was consistent with records the Luridians had shared of a species called the Vraks, known for targeting beauty-paralyzed civilizations. "They're watching," Jim said when Hannah shared the intelligence. "Testing if we're just another easy conquest. Then we'll show them we're not," Hannah replied, authorizing Dr. Minji's adaptation program to begin immediately. "Humans have faced extinction-level threats before. We didn't survive by staring at them. We survived by adapting." The race to overcome beauty paralysis had begun. The air in the secure meeting room felt unusually cold as Hannah stared at the Luridian woman sitting across from her. Unlike the other Luridians, this one had deliberately dulled the luminescent patterns on her skin to a muted gray. "You understand the risk I take by coming here," said the Luridian, who called herself Sun. "If my government discovers this meeting, I will face serious consequences." Hannah nodded. "Your message mentioned urgent information about the Luridian Council's discussions regarding humanity. Whatever you share will remain confidential." Sun's eyes, dark pools that seemed to contain shifting stars, studied Hannah carefully. "My people are debating whether humans are worthy allies," she explained. "Your reaction to us troubles many council members." "The beauty paralysis," Hannah said. "We're working to overcome it. You must work faster." Sun leaned forward. "There is division among our leadership. Some see potential in your species, your creativity, your resilience. Others view you as another failed case." "Failed case?" Hannah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "In our exploration history, we've encountered 27 species with reactions similar to humans. Only 3 overcame their fascination enough to form meaningful partnerships." Hannah's stomach tightened. What happened to the others? Sun's skin darkened further. "Those who admire without action, we call them dreamers, are considered vulnerable in the wider galaxy. Most isolated themselves or became dependent on protector species. 9 were conquered by the Vraks." The Vraks. Hannah had been studying the limited data they had on this other alien race. The ship detected near Jupiter was almost certainly a Vrak scout. Sun confirmed. "They specialize in identifying and exploiting beauty-paralyzed civilizations. They believe such species deserve subjugation." Hannah took a deep breath, processing this information. "You mentioned protector species. Could the Luridians?" "No," Sun interrupted. "My government will not expend resources defending a species that cannot defend itself. That is why this test is crucial. You must demonstrate that humans can appreciate beauty without becoming immobilized by it." After Sun departed, slipping away through a service corridor to avoid detection, Hannah immediately called June and Dr. Minji to her office. "The situation is worse than we thought," she explained. "The beauty paralysis isn't just an inconvenience. It's an existential threat." Dr. Minji looked troubled. "We've started the neural training with 50 volunteers, but it's too early for results. Engineer Hook's prototype lenses show promise, but they're crude, like viewing the world through frosted glass." "What about the Vraks?" June asked. "How imminent is their threat?" According to Sun, they typically observe for weeks or months before taking action. They're patient predators. June pulled up the latest defense reports on his tablet. "Our deep space sensors detected 2 more unidentified vessels yesterday, larger than the Scout. They're maintaining distance but definitely monitoring both Earth and the Luridian delegation." That evening, Ambassador Neri requested a formal meeting with Earth's Leadership Council. When they assembled in the grand conference room, Hannah noticed something different about the Luridian delegation. Their usual vibrant colors were subdued, and they moved with a stiffer, more deliberate gait, as if consciously restraining their natural grace. Ambassador Tejo had noticed too. "They're trying to appear less captivating," he whispered to Hannah. "A courtesy." Neri stood at the center of the room, His normally melodic voice flattened to a more monotone delivery. "Representatives of Earth, I come with a message from my government. It is not one I deliver with pleasure." The room fell silent. "The Loridian Collective has observed your species for 3 of your Earth weeks. While we value your technological achievements and cultural diversity, we have concerns about your species' neurological vulnerability." Hannah watched the human delegates. Despite the Loridians' efforts to appear less striking, several council members were still clearly struggling to focus. "Therefore," Nari continued, "I must deliver this ultimatum. Humans must demonstrate significant progress in overcoming their fascination response within 14 Earth days, or our alliance negotiations will be terminated." General Kim stood up abruptly. "That's not nearly enough time. We're making progress, but—" "I understand your concern," Neri said, raising a hand. "But my government has additional information you should consider. The Vrax battle group detected at the edge of your solar system is larger than initially assessed. They are positioning for what we recognize as standard pre-invasion surveillance." The council erupted in worried conversation, until June called for order. "Ambassador Neri," he said, "are you suggesting that this deadline isn't arbitrary, but based on the Vrax threat timeline?" "Correct. Based on previous Vrax behavior patterns, they will likely test your defenses within 20 Earth days. If you demonstrate the typical response of a beauty-paralyzed species, they will launch a full invasion shortly thereafter." Hannah felt a chill run through her. "And if the Loridian alliance is terminated before then?" Nari's skin darkened to deep indigo. "Then you face them alone." After the Loridians departed, the council remained to develop an emergency response plan. Dr. Minji's neural training program was expanded to include all military personnel and essential government workers. Engineer Hook received unlimited resources to perfect his specialized lenses. Later that night, as Hannah reviewed the latest defense simulations in her office, a communication request came through on a secure channel. It was Sun. "Commander Park," she said, her image grainy through the encrypted connection. "I have risked contacting you again because there is something important you should know." "I'm listening." "The Vrax have a particular method of testing potential conquest targets. They will send a small force, enough to cause damage, but not enough to pose a true threat. Their observers will analyze how your species responds." "What are they looking for?" "If your people become distracted or ineffective when working alongside Loridians during a crisis, the Vrax will confirm their assessment that Earth is ripe for conquest. They believe beauty-paralyzed species cannot fight effectively." "So this test is not just about diplomacy," Sun finished. "It's about survival. Human and Loridian forces must demonstrate they can function together under pressure." After the call ended, Hannah stared out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, predators were watching, waiting for humanity to prove itself just another species of dreamers, capable of admiring the cosmos, but not defending their place within it. The next morning, she authorized an unprecedented joint training initiative between human defense forces and Loridian military advisors. They would have days, not weeks, to learn to work together effectively. "It's time to stop staring and start acting," she told her officers. "Our ability to appreciate alien beauty without being incapacitated by it may determine whether humanity has a future among the stars." As she spoke, the station's sensors detected another Vrax vessel entering the solar system. The countdown had begun. The neural training facility hummed with activity as Dr. Minji adjusted the settings on the monitoring equipment. Around the room, 20 human officers sat in specially designed chairs, electrodes attached to their temples. At the center stood a Loridian volunteer named Jin, his skin displaying brilliant patterns of turquoise and gold. "Remember your training," Dr. Minji said to the officers. "Acknowledge the beauty, then refocus on your cognitive tasks." Hannah watched from behind a glass partition, noting how the officers struggled. Some managed to maintain focus for several minutes before their attention visibly drifted to Jin's mesmerizing features. Others barely lasted seconds. "Progress," She asked Dr. Minji when the session ended. Slow but measurable, Minji replied, reviewing the data. Average focus duration has increased by 17% since we began. Officer Quan shows particular promise. He maintained task completion even while directly interacting with Jin. Not enough, Hannah said, checking the time. We have 9 days until the Loridian deadline, and intelligence suggests the Vrax will test our defenses even sooner. The neural training program had faced significant challenges from the start. Some officials had questioned the ethics of what they called neural reprogramming. Others worried about potential long-term effects on human perception. But with Earth's survival potentially at stake, those concerns have been set aside. In the engineering section, Hannah found a different kind of chaos. Engineer Hook and his team were surrounded by discarded prototypes of their specialized lenses. He looked up as she entered, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Commander Park, he greeted her, holding up a sleek pair of glasses, version 17. We've made a breakthrough. Show me, Hannah said. Huck handed her the glasses. These don't simply dim or blur your vision like the earlier versions. They selectively filter the visual frequency patterns that trigger the strongest neurological responses to Loridian features. Hannah put them on as a Loridian technician entered the room. The difference was striking. She could still see the alien clearly, the graceful movements, the general features, but the overwhelming pull of fascination was significantly reduced. It was like looking at a beautiful sunset without feeling compelled to stare at it. Can we mass-produce these? She asked. We've streamlined the process. 500 pairs within 3 days, with priority for military and diplomatic personnel. Make it 1,000, Hannah ordered, and develop a contact lens version for combat situations. As Hannah left the engineering section, she received an urgent message from June. The Vrax had moved closer. 3 ships now orbited Mars, their energy signatures suggesting they were combat vessels rather than scouts. The station's alert status was raised. Mixed human-Loridian teams began running defense drills, using the new training and technology to maintain operational effectiveness. Despite the progress, tensions remained high. During one simulation, Lieutenant J had frozen while operating alongside a Loridian tactical officer, causing the simulated defense to fail. I've never worked directly with one before, he had explained afterward, clearly embarrassed. The training didn't fully prepare me for the real experience. Hannah understood. There was a vast difference between controlled training scenarios and genuine crisis situations, with their adaptations holed up under actual pressure. Her communicator chimed with a notification. Ambassador Neri had requested a private meeting. They met in a small conference room. Nari wore what appeared to be a device around his neck, a technology that noticeably subdued the luminescence of his skin. You're adapting to us as well, Hannah observed. Yes, this dampener is uncomfortable, but considered a courtesy when meeting with species who experience beauty paralysis. Neri studied her with interest. I notice you maintain eye contact more consistently now. Hannah touched the frame of her glasses. Engineer Huck's filters. They help significantly. Technological assistance, Neri said, an unusual tone in his voice. Most species try this approach first. Is that disapproval I hear? Observation, not judgment. Technology can be lost, damaged, or countered. True adaptation must ultimately come from within. Hannah nodded. That's why we're pursuing both approaches. The glasses give immediate relief while the neural training develops lasting resistance. Wise. Neri's skin briefly flashed a pattern that Hannah had learned indicated approval. My government is monitoring your progress with interest. No beauty-paralyzed species has adapted this quickly before. Necessity drives innovation, Hannah replied. The Vrax's presence is a powerful motivator. Speaking of which, Neri said, his tone becoming more serious, my government has authorized me to share tactical information about Vrax's behavior patterns. Their initial test will likely target a vulnerable location with minimal defenses. They prefer to observe how a species responds to crisis rather than testing their full military capability. As if summoned by his words, the station's alert system blared. June's voice came over the communication system. Commander Park to command center immediately. The command center was in controlled chaos when Hannah arrived. The main screen showed a Vrax vessel approaching one of Earth's outer research stations near the moon. They dropped out of light speed 10 minutes ago, June explained. Current trajectory suggests Research Station Epsilon is their target. The station has minimal defenses and houses 300 scientists. Evacuation status. In progress, but they'll only get about half the personnel out before the Vrax arrive. Hannah made a quick decision. Deploy Defense Group 4. And she paused, looking at Neri, who had followed her to the command center. Would your tactical advisors be willing to join our response team? Neri's skin pulsed with deep crimson patterns. This is the test, Commander Park. If your people become distracted or ineffective when working alongside us during this crisis, I understand the stakes, Hannah said firmly. But your tactical knowledge of Vrax strategies could save lives. After a moment, Neri nodded. I will join the response team personally, along with our military liaison Sue. Within 30 minutes, a joint human-Luridian force was assembled on the lead defense vessel. Hannah noted with cautious optimism that the human officers, equipped with HFY's specialized lenses and having undergone intensive training, maintained professional focus despite the Luridians' presence. As they approached Research Station Epsilon, the Vrax vessel came into view, a dark, angular ship that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They're scanning us, reported Lieutenant G, his eyes fixed on his console rather than on Sue, the Luridian tactical officer beside him. Standard Vrax pre-engagement assessment, Sue confirmed. They are likely surprised to detect Luridian life signs aboard your vessel. Neri moved to stand beside Hannah on the command deck. Now we will see if your adaptations work under pressure, he said quietly. This is not a full attack. It is a test of your species' fundamental nature. The Vrax ship fired a warning shot that passed close to their vessel, the energy wake rocking them slightly. Response options? Hannah asked, noticing with satisfaction that her team maintained operational efficiency despite working alongside their breathtaking allies. They expect hesitation, Neri said. They expect beauty paralysis to slow your decision-making. Hannah gave the order. Show them they're wrong. The Vrax battleship emerged from darkness, its hull absorbing light like a void against the stars. Two smaller vessels flanked it, moving in perfect formation. Earth's defense systems had barely detected their approach before they appeared near Mars' orbital space. Standard intimidation pattern. Explained Nari, standing beside Hannah on the command bridge of the Earth flagship Resilient. They expect paralysis. Hannah studied the tactical display as reports flooded in. After the successful defense of Research Station Epsilon, the Vrax had withdrawn only to return with greater numbers. This was no longer a test. It was a preliminary invasion force. All stations report, Hannah ordered, her voice steady, despite the tension gripping the bridge. Lieutenant G responded first. Defensive systems at full capacity. Joint Human-Luridian Tactical Team ready. One by one, the station officers reported in, each working alongside a Luridian counterpart. Hannah noted with pride that her crew maintained focus despite the Luridians' presence. Some wore HFY's specialized lenses, while others relied solely on their neural training. The Vrax flagship is hailing us, Communications Officer Min announced. On screen, Hannah commanded. The main display flickered, revealing a Vrax commander. Its appearance was startling. Gray skin stretched tight over an angular skull, with eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The complete opposite of Luridian beauty, yet disturbing in its own way. This is Commander Hannah Park of Earth Defense Force, she said. The Vrax commander studied her, then shifted its gaze to Nari. Luridian presence on your command bridge is unexpected. We are allies, Hannah replied simply. A sound emerged from the Vrax that might have been laughter. Impossible. Beauty-fixated species cannot overcome their nature so quickly. You deceive us. Test us and find out. Hannah challenged. The communication ended abruptly. Moments later, the tactical display lit up as the Vrax vessels began to move. They're targeting our outer defense satellites, reported Jay. Standard opening move to blind planetary defenses. Neri nodded. As expected. They will then target your communication network to isolate Earth from its colonies. Hannah turned to her mixed crew. Defense pattern Omega. Show them what a human Luridian alliance can do. The battle unfolded with surprising swiftness. The Vrax clearly expected disorganized resistance, but instead encountered coordinated defense from ships with both humans and Luridians working in perfect sync. When the Vrax adapted their tactics, Neri's knowledge of their battle patterns proved invaluable. They're retreating from the satellite grid, Jai announced after 20 minutes of intense engagement. They're regrouping, Neri cautioned. This will be the true test. They now realize we are functioning effectively together. They will attempt to separate us. As predicted, the Vrax launched a targeted attack against the Luridian diplomatic vessel docked at Earth Station Omega. It was a calculated move, forcing humans to choose between defending their own infrastructure or protecting their allies. They think we'll hesitate, Hannah said. Dispatch Defense Group 2 to the Luridian vessel. We protect our allies first. The decision surprised the Vrax. Their attack faltered as they encountered unexpected resistance. After sustaining damage to their secondary vessels, the Vrax commander requested communication once more. Your defense patterns are anomalous, the commander said, obvious confusion in its voice. Luridian tactical influence is evident, yet human execution is precise. How is this possible? As I said, Hannah replied calmly, we are allies. No beauty-paralyzed species has adapted this quickly. The Vrax insisted. Your kind should be incapable of effective cooperation with Luridians. Neri stepped forward, his skin patterns shifting to a calm, authoritative blue. Perhaps you should reconsider your assumptions about human nature. The Vrax commander fell silent, its dark eyes shifting between Hannah and Neri. Finally, it spoke. The Vrax Dominion will review its assessment of human capability. This incursion was merely a preliminary evaluation. And what did you learn? Hannah asked. That humans are unpredictable. The communication ended. Within hours, the Vrax fleet had withdrawn from the solar system. Long-range sensors tracked them jumping to light speed, heading away from Earth territory. In the aftermath, Hannah met with Neri in the station's observation dome. The Earth hung below them, peaceful and blue against the blackness of space. The Vrax will return eventually, Neri said. But not soon. They prefer easier conquests. They underestimated us, Hannah replied. Most species do. Neri's skin rippled with patterns that Hannah had learned indicated thoughtfulness. In our history, no species has adapted as rapidly as humans. Others take years to develop resistance to beauty paralysis. Some never do. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Hannah said. When survival is at stake, humans can overcome almost any limitation. It's more than that, Neri countered. Your people found a unique approach. Most species try to ignore our beauty or shield themselves from it completely. Humans learn to appreciate it while remaining capable of action. Thanks to Dr. Minji's training and Engineer Huck's technology. Technology helped, Neri acknowledged, but the fundamental change came from within. Your people embraced a simple truth that others missed. Appreciation need not lead to paralysis. Later that day, the Luridian High Council transmitted their formal decision. The alliance with Earth would proceed. Moreover, they were extending an invitation for humans to join the Galactic Concord, a coalition of species dedicated to mutual protection and cultural exchange. The first beauty-paralyzed species to be offered membership, Neri explained during the announcement ceremony. Your unique adaptation has earned the respect of my government. As applause filled the chamber, Hannah noticed something remarkable. Many of the human officials had stopped wearing their specialized lenses. Through repeated exposure and training, they had developed natural resistance to beauty paralysis. They could now appreciate Loridian's splendor without losing themselves in it. 1 month later, as the first joint human-Loridian fleet prepared for its maiden voyage, Hannah stood with Nari on the observation deck. The newly commissioned ship bore an inscription along its hull, written in both human and Loridian languages. "See the stars, but steer the ship," an old human saying. Nari asked. "A new one," Hannah replied, smiling. "Born from our encounter with your people. It captures the essence of what your species has achieved," Nari said, his skin glowing with warm golden patterns. "You've proven that one can admire beauty while still taking action. That awareness of wonder and practical capability need not be separate." As the ship departed, its engines glowing against the darkness, Hannah reflected on how far they had come. What had begun as a neurological vulnerability had transformed into a philosophical strength, a uniquely human approach to the universe that combined appreciation with action. The beauty of the cosmos was still overwhelming, but humanity had learned to navigate through it rather than simply stare in awe. They had found their place among the stars not by ignoring their wonder, but by channeling it into purposeful movement forward.